So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
That should be
I can hear you.
Now somehow
Now
my
somehow
voice is
my voice
echoing,
is echoing.
but
But
that's all right.
that's all right.
so am I visible on screen?
Yeah, can you hear me
Can you
clearly?
hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. You're fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll wait for a
We'll
second
wait
till
for a
the
second
audience
till the
builds up.
audience builds up.
Till then
Till then we can
optimally adjust this
optimally adjust this
headphones and mics,
headphones and
etc.
mics, etc.
But I can hear you clearly. I mean, my voice audible?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can hear you,
I can
but
hear you, but
I can't hear
I
you
can't hear you
clearly.
clearly.
So
So
It's because of the echo that's happening in my voice.
yeah, so sorry,
yeah, so
I
sorry,
can't hear you
I can't
clearly
hear you
actually.
clearly actually.
So yeah,
So
you
yeah,
could again
you
try
could
and use
again
the
try and use the
headphones.
headphones.
Saying that you talk to me. Okay.
Yeah, yes. Now, is it any better now? I mean, can you
It's
still hear
better.
me?
The voice, yeah, I can still hear you, but my voice is echoing. But that should be fine. Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So, can anyone from the audience actually confirm that is everything fine? Can everyone hear us? Oh, yeah. Now it's good. Okay. So
It's
Anna
good.
is saying
Okay.
that it's good. Okay.
Okay, it
Yeah.
should be good.
So yeah. So now let's.
Sorry for these problems. I think they were completely
Yeah.
uncalled for. We had run a trial the other day, but
Yeah. So we can maybe start with our introduction.
sure.
So yeah.
So go ahead. I already did. I can still do again.
Yeah, so my name is Zaid, and I am a long-term visiting student here at International Center for Theoretical Sciences. I am affiliated with the string theory group here, and I've been looking at various things around here, and my term here ends in maybe May around, and then I'll be making my graduate school applications. And we have with us here today Brother Ubaid, who's a graduate student at Kent State University. His graduate school focus is on particle physics, particularly quantum chromodynamics and strong interactions. So he will be taking some of the questions, and I'll be asking him some questions. And we can also try and take questions from the audience as well. So primarily the focus will be on graduate school applications and related stuff. So let's begin actually. So let me begin by asking you what actually are the essential components of a graduate school application for a typical graduate school in, let's say, United States.
So normally, it depends on the university that you are coming from. For example, you from where you have done your undergrad studies, from where you have done your master's studies. For example, if you're coming from an institution like IIT, any of the IITs or TFR or ISC Bangalore, so it wouldn't be that complicated for you to go into any of the institutions. So I'll say the most important component again is your grades. They are indispensable. Your grades are indispensable. Your GRE scores are indispensable. Since we are particularly talking about physics, so GRE general as well as GRE physics are very important besides TOEFL. Besides TOEFL, and your research experience comes in handy if you are coming from universities which are not good enough in a way. People, for those people who do not know about universities like, say, Kashmir University is not well known to the people here in America, especially if you have been a student of physics department there. So I'll say these are the most important components. I mean, your GRE general score, your GRE physics score, your letters of recommendation, how well you structure your SOP, how well you write your CV, and and all these things, and all the GRE scores.
So yeah. So so let's make a few precise statements in a sense that could you go over could you go over as a list, for instance, like what are the components of a graduate school application and how that is to be structured. For instance, let's just begin by CV, and then we can go on to the statement of purpose, and then we can go on to talk about the letters of recommendation.
So are we taking questions also? So one of the guys is saying that what is the
Yes,
most
what is the best way to score high in GRE?
So
I
it
think
depends.
we'll take questions and we'll come to this. I mean, we'll come to this particular question, but we can go start from the CV itself and then the SAP
Sure,
and stuff like that.
sure.
Yeah.
So when it comes to CV, so since we are applying for the graduate studies specifically, and that too in physics, people will normally be interested in what your research inclinations are. So they will not be interested in your research. They will not be interested in what your motivations in physics are in general, but more so particularly they will be interested what your research inclinations are. Because by now they understand that you have done your undergraduate research, you have done your master's research, you have written your undergraduate thesis, you have written your master's thesis. So they want from you in your CV what makes you think, what makes you believe that you can work in this field of physics. Say for example, if you're applying in, for example, in string theory, so you need to write down in precisely, you need to write down precisely what motivates you, what you have done up till now that makes you qualified enough to apply there. That will include your previous education, your undergraduate studies, your research experience that you have done. Especially in physics, we need certain skill sets. The skill sets are like how competent are you in mathematics, and how competent are you in the programming languages, especially if you're doing theoretical physics. So these are the very
Sure,
important
sure.
things that you should be listing down. Apart from this, the other things like you have been working with this NGO and you're working with this NGO, that does not work with physics, right? So make it as precise as you can. Your research experience, your undergrad and master's studies, your grades, what your GRE scores, your research experience, some other publications that you have made, that should be enough.
Yeah, I think we have a question here with regard to the CV. So we're being asked, so what is it that should not be in the CV? What works against the candidature in CVs?
Oh, exactly. That's what I was saying. If you're applying for a graduate school in physics, make sure you do not add unnecessary details. Make sure you are as precise and as short you are. Whatever your ability in mathematics and computer sciences, or which are the add-ons besides your physics understanding, only those should be added.
So things like, for instance, somebody is doing some community service or somebody has some,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely no.
So,
There's a big no for that. Red flags for that. When it comes to graduate school applications in physics.
oh, I see. Okay, okay. That's with the CV. Then the second most important component of a graduate school application, as you said, is the statement of purpose. The
Exactly.
statement of purpose is generally understood to be a statement, a personal sort of a statement, wherein you list all the motivations that kind of drove you towards this field.
Towards it.
But I would like to ask you a very specific question about statement of purposes when it comes to physics graduate school applications. Therein also they might not appreciate why exactly are you driven towards doing physics. And
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. Not exactly what has driven you towards physics, but exactly what has driven you to this specific branch of physics. For example, in my case, I was driven by general theory of relativity. I wanted to do my graduate research in anything related to general theory of relativity, and for that, I listed that I was motivated by a book named General Relativity by Robert Wald. So you need to be as specific as you can. The that you have been motivated to do physics is for the undergraduate applications,
I see.
but but for the graduate school you need to be very specific. What drove you towards this area of research? What drove you towards string theory? For example, if you are applying in string theory, what drove you towards high energy physics or condensed matter physics or whatever you are applying to? Because by
I
now they
see.
do understand that you have done some research, you are coming with some experience in for example, you have already done your undergraduate thesis, you have already done your master's thesis, so you have a good competence in research.
So statements like I used to enjoy problem solving when I was like a teenager or so, and I
That
cracked this and that exam. So those statements might not belong to a physics graduate school
they
statement
may
of
not belong
purpose.
to the physics graduate school, but they will not do any harm as far as I understand.
I see.
Normally you don't. Normally, when you apply for universities, graduate schools in US, especially in physics, so you can go to any amount of length you want when it comes to SOP. There's no bar on the amount of pages, no bar on the amount of lines that you can write. For example, in my case, I wrote it was something like 2 or 3 pages. It was almost, I typed it on the latex. You can add the bibliography, the number of papers you want to cite, number of books that you want to cite. You can add all these things in your
Oh,
SOP.
okay. So in your SOP, you also provided a list of references where you
Exactly.
referred to actual research material.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. For example, in your case, if you have published any of the research material, you will explain that I did this, and this is my research, and this is what I did at ICTS, and you will cite that paper if it's already out. For example, in
I
my
see.
case, if I'm telling you that I was interested and motivated by Robert Wall's book, so I did mention Robert Wall's book also. I mentioned, for example, Hawking's and Penrose's book also.
I see. Okay, so that goes for the statement of purpose, and then there's one more essential component, which is the letters of recommendation. Actually,
Exactly.
so the letters of recommendation have to come from somebody who you know academically. In a sense that it should come from somebody you've worked with, and especially in the field you are applying to. So in this case,
Exactly.
it has to come from a physics professor. So yes, so my question here is that how relevant is it that how reputed that person is who is writing a letter for you, and
It
what
will.
essentially should you ask him or her to write in your letter of recommendation?
Mostly the recommendation letter will carry a weightage if you have done some amount of substantial work with the person. For example, if you have written any of the thesis with the person, or you have been a student of the person. But if somehow the person is reputed enough, and you have been somehow connected to him or connected to his group. For example, you're working at ICTS, and I'll say that you have somehow been connected with Spandavadia's group, right?
Yes.
So, and he knows you, and you have talked to him. If he can write a recommendation letter for you, that would be good enough for that. That would be good enough and will serve your purpose. But
I
most
see.
importantly, most importantly, those recommendation letters will carry weightage with whom you have worked at a substantial level. For example, written your thesis, or for example, with which you are doing your project, or or those who have taught you at some level.
Oh, I see. So it need not be some reputed person, but a person who knows you just enough and who you have worked
If
substantially.
if the person is reputed enough, there is nothing better than that. I've seen persons getting admits at Cambridge University without having any research experience, just because Ashok Sen wrote a recommendation letter for them, and they got the admit there, just because of the recommendation letter of the Ashok Sen. So
I see.
that's what reputed people's recommendation letter carry a lot of weightage.
I see. I see. And there's also some questions about yeah. So there's a question: what should be the structure of SOP? So could you just briefly go over? I mean, what should be the structure? Like, how do you begin and how do you end? Like, how
So
do you
normally
introduce
when you're
yourself in
writing
an SOP?
so when you're writing an SOP or candidate statement that I say, it normally starts with your academic background, what you have done up till now, what has motivated you to, for example, firstly, just write down what you have done up till now, what your qualifying examinations are. Then go to the level of explaining to them what motivated you to do this kind of research. For example, if you're applying for string theory, if you're applying for high energy physics, explain it to them, the motivation that is there in pursuing the string theory.
I see.
And then later on, what your research experience has been. That's the most important part, because most of the time in graduate level school you will be doing research. It's not a master's level program that you will be having coursework and you'll be done with that. So normally they will want you to be competent enough to do research. So they
I
will
see.
want you to have and carry some amount of research experience, howsoever small that is. So
I see. So
explain it in detail, what amount of research experience you have, and why you are a perfect candidate, and at last why you are a perfect candidate for this graduate school. That will
I see.
vary from the university to university. If you are applying at, say, Chicago, that will depend on that will depend on the department at Chicago. If you are applying at somewhere else, that will depend on the department there.
I see. So the structure is like you begin by introducing yourself and your academic achievements. You list them, for instance, whatever courses of relevance you have taken, and whatever your background up till now is. Are you a student who's having a bachelor's degree or a master's degree?
Master's
And then
degree.
you go on and describe your research experience,
You
and then you
exactly you
list. And then you list any publications or any thesis that you have
and,
written. And
and most importantly, do add the persons of interest in it in this candidate statement. For
oh,
example, if you're
okay,
applying
okay.
it, for example, if you're applying here at KSU, do mention the names of the people that you are interested in working with, and do list in their research fields, and do list in why their research fields do kind of meet with your research experience that you have up till now.
I see. So it also involves in looking around for the faculty you want to work with, and then looking up their, let's say, latest papers maybe, and then
Exactly.
summarizing them in some sense. Yes.
Exactly. That's the most that's a very important part. So the difference between a graduate school in US and the school in Europe is that mostly in European countries you need to email a professor before you get an admission there, right? But in US it's not like that. It's like there's a very well structured format. You need to send your applications, and it's only after you send your application that professor will look at your recommendation, will look at your CV and will look at your SOP. But it doesn't harm you if you list your professors before.
I see. So one can even write to, let's say, some faculty members in US, United States universities as well. Doesn't
Exactly.
harm the cause in any way.
It doesn't harm. It doesn't harm.
Yeah.
It will only perhaps pique the interest of those professors who you want to work with and whose name you have mentioned.
I see, I see, I see. Okay. So here's a question. So is Murtaza Ali Warsi is asking, I have done a project in condensed matter physics during my undergrad studies, but I want to do higher studies in experimental particle physics. Will my
Uh-huh.
project be of any help in application?
While it may not be help per se, that you will not be carrying any amount of research expertise into the field that you want to work with, but it surely will encourage your professor or the person who wants to admit you, that he'll get an encouragement that this guy has worked good enough and is competent enough. If you are publishing a paper, there's nothing better than that.
Yes, I wanted to come to this. I mean, how important are the publications for the application, and do they carry any significant weight? I mean, let's just say somebody is not, yeah. So the precise question is this. There are many people who want to switch fields. For instance, in my case, I'm switching from engineering to physics. So there are many people who are switching fields in some sense, or moving from engineering to physics. So for them, is there anything in particular that you want to say?
In your case, as has been the case of a lot of my friends who did their engineering, who did their graduate studies in engineering, then their interest kind of peaked in physics. That's the case with most of the people who think perhaps that they at some point of time get interested in doing physics, especially string theory. So they got interested in string theory. They are now in states doing string theory and QCD and all this stuff. So the most important thing in their application for people like you who are switching your fields, you may not carry any amount of expertise that you have gained in your previous field and
I
that you
see.
can apply here. For example, in your case, for example, if you have done engineering in electrical engineering, if your
Electronics,
background is
yes.
electronics or electrical, whatever.
Electrical, yeah.
So once you want to do string theory, it's not going to help.
Yeah,
There's nothing like
it's
in
not going to
your
help.
it's not going to help. But if you had been doing if you want to do experimental condensed matter physics or experimental high energy physics, then it can be of any help. So for people like you who are switching fields, the most important thing is your GRE physics score more
I
than your
see.
research papers, because that will show the amount of understanding that you have of physics. For people like you, I'll say that who want to do string theory and are switching fields from engineering background to physics, the most important thing when you want to change, just go to the book, Afkin Weber's book, The Math Methods. If you feel like you are confident enough, if you feel like you can read and understand and solve the problems they are in, then go ahead. There's nothing stopping you.
I see.
So I think GRE physics scores should be the most important thing. Besides, if you are having papers with some well-reputed people like you have with Chetan and Palla perhaps, so it will not do any harm to your paper, your application.
I see.
But GRE
So,
physics is
so
something that's very important, yeah, for people
I
like
see.
you.
I see. So there's one more important question. Actually, it comes from Professor Sophie Saab. So he's asking that besides providing these tips for writing CVs and SOPs, it should help to share with the viewers the kind of difficulty you might have encountered in the respect of your backgrounds and the kind of.
Okay, that's a very good question. I didn't mention it beforehand that I did my undergraduate studies. I did my BSc physics, and that's what it's called from Aligarh. Then I did my masters from Aligarh itself and did some student research at Med Science and at ICTS like you are, and at perhaps I was fortunate enough that my professors at very important stages of my masters recommended me to the people at different institutions of repute in India. So for me, it was not very difficult to convince people here in US that I'm competent enough to do graduate studies, because I had some amount of research experience, and I did GRE general GRE physics, and the scores were good, and I didn't have to face any such problem. But this should be a problem for most of the students who are coming from, say, degree college, Baramulla, or degree college, any of the degree college, or any of the college that are affiliated with Kashmir University, or who have done their masters from Kashmir University.
Yeah, I see.
It should be a big task for them. like
I
like
see.
like you were like you wanted to switch field at that point of time, and I had suggested you that you go and do a student research before you join any of the graduate studies, and it ended up that you were lucky enough and you got a long-term fellowship at ICTS.
Yes, this was actually the second. Yeah, so I think that if anyone of the audience, anyone among the audience is facing a lot of trouble with the audio, he or she might try and use headphones actually, because I figured out that using headphones actually helps. So you might try and use headphones. Yes, so I was getting so we're getting a lot of questions from the audience, but we'll address each one of them. But yeah, so since you mentioned student research and visiting student opportunities, and in my case, it had a pivotal role to play in some sense. So
Exactly.
I came to ICTS a couple of times. This is my second time here. It was only because you suggested it. I mean, I wouldn't even think of it. So there are many students out there. There are many students out there who are kind of looking for that kind of advice. So, would you say something more about that?
I think for people who are interested in physics, the problem with us, especially for those who are in Kashmir, is that mostly the professors and mostly the faculty that there is in the Kashmir University Physics Department belongs to the experimental field. I'll address the larger question. So mostly the people who they will train them in they will train them in experimental fields. We do not have a good enough, and we do not have competent enough theoretical physicists there in Kashmir. So that's very indispensable to, for example, indispensable in the sense that if you want to motivate someone to do string theory, you need a theoretical physicist, right? And we have
Right,
a
right.
we have a great paucity of that in Kashmir University. We will do
I
a
see.
great service. We'll do a great service if we add a few people there who are competent and good enough, and they'll motivate students. Especially, you need to motivate students at each level. You cannot waste your undergraduate BSc level studies. It's such an important aspect of your application. It's such an important application, such an important aspect of your overall research grooming. But in
I
Kashmir,
see.
it's normally lost. We do not have good enough people to guide us. If they are good enough, they do not care about it. So I think
I
right
think
from the undergraduate.
there's a lot of echo. So you might
In
want
my
to
voice.
yeah. So you might
Should I
want to
take my should I take my headphones off or bring it?
bring them closer. I think.
Oh, I think, and one more thing that I wanted to address is that there is, for example, for us, like we're interested in string theory and high energy physics. There is a breadth, and there is great paucity of funds in US, in United States. The groups are very exclusive. They do not expect students, and they do not accept students these days from third world countries, especially when
I
it comes
see.
to string theory. And if you are not coming from a background, if you are not coming from universities like TFR or ISC or IIT Kanpur, so I think you need to understand this very thing. If you're
I
coming
see.
from Kashmir University, get yourself enrolled somewhere, somehow, in any of the institutions in India, be it ISC, be it TFR, be it any of the IITs. Get associated with any of the professor, do any amount of research work that you want. Get that name added to your application that you have worked here at TFR or ISC or ICTS or any of the institutions. That is indispensable. There's nothing that can replace that. If
I
you are
see.
coming from India.
I see. So the take-home message here is that even if you're not coming from a very good university per se, then there is a way to remedy that, is to have your name associated with
Exactly.
some reputed guy in TIFR or some reputed place in India. So
if
in
if you
that
cannot
sense,
if you cannot do
so
that, if your GRE physics score is not good, if you're scoring exceptionally well in GRE physics, there should be no role of, it shouldn't matter whether you have worked at TFR or whether you have worked at IC Bangalore. If
I see.
I'm saying that if the question arises, if your score is exceptionally well, be it in GRE General or be it in GRE Physics, then I think it should be very easy for you to get an admit from any of the universities here in America.
I see. So there are a few questions pertaining to experimental physics. So one question is solid state physics and yes. Can you just briefly comment on the state of solid state physics, electronic device fabrication, and stuff like that? And
So
there's also a
normally,
question. Yeah, there's also a question. How do you see engineering as an emerging offshoot of experimental physics? How
so
important is it?
it is extremely important because of the fact that people who do making stuff, who fabricate devices, ultimately come from the engineering background. Though that amount of expertise is required there. So physics as of now, we see it's in the interdisciplinary field. People from engineering background are coming in, they are bringing the expertise that they have there, and people from the physics background are coming and they are bringing the expertise that they have. My expertise, as I said, is mostly theoretical physics. It's QCD and string theory to some extent, ADS CFT correspondency. But I'll say that the status right now of solid state physics is very encouraging, extremely encouraging. If you do your graduate studies from any of the American universities, you will have no amount of problem in getting a postdoc at any of the institutions in US. It's very difficult in my field. There is no scope of being average in string theory or in QCD. You need to be exceptionally bright. Your research publications should be very good. Nothing below PRL, PRLB, PRLA, PRLC works. If you. So I think so. Solid state physics is kind of a thing because it has a practical application also. You have a lab where you can work, where you can fabricate things. Especially if you see the superconducting, the high temperature superconductivity is on a boom these days. Especially with you are using condensed matter theory, you're using ADS-CMT, and you are explaining such things. I think solid state physics has the brightest of the futures. You don't need to worry about postdoc positions.
Hmm. Yes, so there are a few questions from the students. So one of the questions is about what is the level of GRE physics? Is an undergrad student of universities like AMU trained enough to score good in GRE physics?
Exactly, but what amount of training have you gone through? It'll depend on that. For example, I'll say that if you have solved all the problems, I have talked perhaps about this before. If you are good enough with Griffiths level, for example, if you have solved from page to page Griffiths quantum mechanics, if you have solved Griffiths ENM, if you are good enough with Marian's classical mechanics and StatMag David Tong's lecture notes on StatMag, it should be enough. Undergraduate level should be enough.
Oh,
It
okay.
doesn't
So
go beyond that.
yes, okay. So there's another question also, like yeah. So if a student has done BTech in civil, I think this question's already been answered in a sense that switching fields is possible. Yes.
Is possible.
So yes, it comes,
To
but
to
it
add
comes with
to
a
add to
little
this
bit of.
one of my colleagues here who is doing theory, who is doing condensed matter theory, had majors in philosophy. So you can only
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
There's no
it's
problem
it's
with that.
it's it's possible, even possible to do a
Radical
radical
transformation.
shift of yes.
As I said, it will depend on what field you want to go in. If you want to do a theory physics, theory graduate level studies, for example, if you want to go to condensed matter theory or string theory, just sit down and go to the Afkin Weber's book. Go flip the pages. If you think you can understand and you can do it, then go ahead. There's nothing that can stop you.
So Sophie Sir was asking another question. Do you think you had reasonable background in differential geometry or topology before you proceeded for the US? These are the areas which are more
Uh-huh.
useful for the kind of research is being done in string theory and particle physics.
Exactly. I did not, unfortunately, but that's what we have to go through. We are taught such courses at graduate level. So yeah, differential geometry and topology, they're indispensable if you want to do research do research in string theory. That's correct. I didn't had Unfortunately, we don't have such expertise while I was doing my masters in Aligarh, but I did learn some amount of it while I was doing student research at Math Science and ICTS and CDP.
I see.
But you need not to. But you need not to worry about this because you will be taught this in the graduate level schools.
Yes, I think the part of graduate level courses that you would take, for instance, I mean the kind of electives you would take for your in your graduate studies, you would preferably want to include all these subjects, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it comes to string theory, differential geometry, topology, even analysis, they're very
Yes, I
important,
mean, very indispensable in that.
indispensable. Exactly.
Uh, yes, so there are lots of questions coming about quantum electronics and solid state physics. Yes, so I see more opportunities post PhD in solid state physics, devices physics, and quantum physics. You can highlight more.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That if you have any experience with the lab equipment, if you can do any amount of experiments in the lab in the experimental condensed matter physics, there are so many opportunities. There are so many opportunities. There's so much of funding. There's so much of funding in this field. I mean, what amount of funding there used to be in the string theory has been deviated, and now people are investing that hugely on the experimental condensed matter physics because it's paying them dividends. You are getting high temperature superconductors. You are getting all other fancy things. So for
I
those who are
see, I
for
see.
those who want to do condensed matter, experimental condensed matter physics, even experimental high energy physics, the field is very vast. The funding is in abundance. There's nothing to worry about.
I see. So there are more questions coming about switching fields and having.
Uh-huh.
So there's a question: if somebody is having an M.Tech in electronics and communication engineering, can he go for a PhD without masters? Yes, it
Yeah,
is possible.
absolutely,
You
absolutely,
can, but
absolutely.
you would have to follow certain procedures already been outlined here if you were a part
Uh-huh.
of the broadcast when it started. Yeah, so it is entirely possible that you don't need to get a master's degree. Even, I mean, with a BTech, you are
You're
eligible to
you're good
directly
enough.
apply
Yeah,
for a
you're
PhD
good enough.
because already have a 4 years bachelor's. So these were some of the questions actually which were specifically pertaining to graduate school applications, and there are, I'm sure, many more such questions. But let us go back a little bit and
Uh-huh.
let me ask you about. So for students who are currently in their undergraduate programs or their master's degree, so for various subjects there is like everybody keeps on recommending one textbook or the other. So there are
Exactly.
a few core courses. So there are a few core courses. I want to ask you specifically which books by which authors are good. So let me just begin with mathematical methods. So mathematical methods is a very indispensable subject. Without that, you
Exactly.
can't really
So
go ahead. So let me just
before I
start with
uh-huh.
mathematical methods. So
before I answer
which is a
that,
good textbook for that?
once you are admitted to any of the universities in US for the graduate level studies, you'll have to go through a rigorous course. There's a coursework there in for, which may extend up to 2 years. So before you're given an opportunity to work in any of the research fields here, you need to pass a qualifying examination.
Which you call the
So
comprehensive.
which some call it comprehensive, some call it candidacy examinations,
I see.
and its
I
level
see.
it operates at a level which is more difficult than you have seen any of the examinations in India.
I see.
And it tests four of the main subjects that we will talk about, like classical mechanics, like ENM, electromagnetic theory. It will test your knowledge on StatMech. It will test your knowledge on the basics of quantum mechanics. So when you are wanting to apply for the graduate studies in US, make sure, prepare your brain that you should be well enough competent to solve the problems. Only then you will be allowed to do research in any of the fields here. So you need to qualify that examinations.
I
Uh,
see. I
and
see.
coming to your question of mathematics, which is extremely important and extremely. I mean, if you're doing theory, like me and you are doing, there's nothing more important than mathematical physics. So
Yes.
for me, mathematics by Afkin and Weber has been indispensable. So there is nothing that
Yes,
can replace it.
mathematical methods by Afkin and Weber is undoubtedly a great book, but it might not be accessible as somebody it might not be good as a first read
For an
for
undergrad student, exactly.
yes,
For an
yeah.
undergrad
So
student, no. For an undergrad
yeah.
student, there are other books like there are other books, mostly by the Indian authors that you can go through. There are
So there
basic
is
textbooks.
particularly a book which is called, I think there's a book by H.K. Das. How do you like that?
Exactly.
Is that good enough?
So it'll depend. It will depend on the environment that you want yourself to put in. If you're preparing yourself to come to the United States, no,
No,
absolutely
no.
not.
So,
If you
what my question is this. For a first reading, I think a book like H.K. Das would be good, and then one might want to switch to Afkin Weber after
you
one
can you
is,
can you can have it as an add-on. For example, I have an Afghan Weber there, and for references, take HK Das and take HK Das and do problems from there. So HK Das is something
I
that
see.
has detailed explanations and like how we do in India, the way we are used to solving problems in India. So the methods are there. So Afkin Weber
I see.
is a bit more precise. It's more, I mean, you've seen it. So
Yeah, I've seen Afghan Weber. So that goes with the mathematical methods, and then classical mechanics. So everybody
classical,
says
exactly.
that Goldstein is a great book. I don't
For
have any reason to disagree with that, but yeah.
the problem,
So
yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt in that Goldstein is Bible of classical mechanics. No, absolutely no doubt in that. But I'll say that if you want to solve problems, and the first read would be the book that we are exposed to at our 11th and 12th class levels,
oh,
Resnick
okay,
and Halliday. Keep that with
okay.
you. Then there is Marion's book on classical mechanics. Solve its problems. If you can solve problems of classical mechanics by Marion, that will cover most of your candidacy examination that you will face when you come to America.
I
There
see.
are
So that
there are
okay.
books.
So
There are
David
there are
Morin,
books. There are
you're
more
talking about.
books. There are more books, specifically the problem books by Chinese authors. University of Hong Kong. They have prepared those 4 or 5 books that will cover all the problems related to electromagnetic theory. That will cover most of the problems with classical stat mech and quantum mechanics. And get those four
Yes.
books. Problems. Yeah, these are the American University qualifying examination problems.
Hmm. I see.
Problem
Okay, okay,
books.
okay,
The
okay, okay.
four. There are four of them. So you need them. Any student of physics has to have them
Okay.
and
So that
solve
is
them from
classical.
page to page.
So that
Okay,
goes with the
okay. Let's build from
yes.
classical mechanics. So we agreed on this that Goldstein is absolutely Bible. Marion
Yes.
is there, and
Yes.
there are other books. Landau's book, for example, it's a gold mine. It's so short, but it contains almost everything that's contained in Goldstein. So
Okay.
nothing can replace Landau. Nothing can replace Landau, but Goldstein is more. It's like explaining things in more detail. Landau will shorten it down.
I see. I think we have some connection issue. Are you there? The video somehow froze. Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, I think we've lost connection with Ubaid. Let me try and get him back again. Uh, yeah, I think there is a way we can invite him again, right? All right, so we can do one thing. We can end the video. We can start a new video in a couple of minutes. Uh, or we can just try and do this again. I mean, there must be some way to do this. Yeah, Anna, can you just text Obad so see what's wrong actually? So we can actually add him back to this particular feed only. We don't have to take the video down. Okay. Okay. So there are so till now till the time Ubad bhai gets back, there are a couple of interesting questions. So first, I mean Hilal bhai has asked a question. Sorry, I might not be able to answer this, but yeah. So there are actually a couple of questions that I would like to address till Ubad bhai is back first. So. So Yes. Uh, about the summer internship opportunities in India. So there are many of them. So TIFR has a visiting students research program that the applications typically open in January or February, and the program starts in May. Uh, yeah, let me just try and get Obad back and we can talk more about it. We might have to end the video and start a new one. Yeah, let me just end this and start a new one actually. But I'm going to keep this on the wall.